She was sold to an Apache, whipped by a mountain man, but a Lakota named her home. The desert wind carried the smell of sweat, smoke, and something cruel as the crowd gathered near the edge of the trading post. The air shimmered with heat, and even the horses shifted restlessly, their ears twitching at the sound of coins clinking in a man's palm. Clara Wren stood in the center of the dust, her wrists bound, her once white dress streaked with sand and the memory of what used to be pride. She had been a mail-order bride once, sent by train to a husband who wanted obedience more than companionship, but she had never made it past the first night. When the man discovered she could read and spoke her mind, he'd taken his money back from the broker and sold her the next morning like a wagon too worn to haul freight. Now she stood where the ground cracked from thirst, listening as strangers bartered her future in a language that reduced her to weight, worth, and work. "$50 short," the rancher growled. "She's barely fit for kitchen duty." The trader smirked. "She'll fetch more than that to an Apache camp. They need workers, maybe wives." The word burned through her like a spark. Someone laughed, low, mean, without mercy. Then came the voice that ended the bidding, smooth and steady but laced with authority. "I'll take her," said a man whose shadow fell across her face. She looked up, squinting against the glare, and saw him. Dark hair tied back, skin bronzed from sun and war, eyes that didn't mock or leer, only measured. He spoke little, paid in silver, and when he cut her bindings, his knife moved as gently as if he feared the rope might bleed. "You'll ride quiet," he said, his voice deep and low. She nodded, too stunned to speak. The trader spat. "You'll regret it. She's more trouble than she looks." The Apache said nothing, just guided her toward a paint horse tethered nearby. The murmurs followed them as they left the post. The sound of judgment carried on wind. For miles they rode without words, the sun beating down on her shoulders, the road stretching endless and cruel. She wanted to ask his name, his reason, his intention, but her throat was dry and her courage smaller than the shadows of his horse's hooves. When they stopped at dusk by a ridge of red stone, he handed her a canteen and nodded toward a patch of shade. "Drink," he said simply. She obeyed, water spilling over her trembling hands. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why buy what you don't need?" He looked at her then, his gaze calm, unreadable. "Needed nothing," he said. "But I saw men who needed to be stopped." The answer settled like a stone in her chest. He wasn't her owner. He was her interruption, something sent to halt her breaking. As night fell, he built a small fire, silent but deliberate, and handed her a strip of dried meat. She ate, the taste foreign but saving. When the flames cracked, she dared to ask, "What do I call you?" He stared into the fire a long time before answering. "Talon," he said. "And you?" "Clara," she murmured. He nodded once. "Then Clara, you'll sleep now. The road's longer than you think." She lay near the fire, her mind tangled in questions she couldn't speak. Above them, the stars spread like promises no one had yet kept. She closed her eyes, half expecting to wake alone. But when dawn came, he was still there, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the horizon, as if guarding her from the world that had sold her cheap. And for the first time in years, she didn't wake afraid. The trail from the Apache's camp curved north into country too wild for traders and too sacred for maps, the kind of land where the wind carried no judgment and the rocks seemed older than sin. Clara rode behind Talon in silence, her hands gripping the worn leather of the saddle as the hours melted together in a blur of sun and dust. He spoke little, and when he did, his words were short as rain in drought. "We stop when the horse stops," he'd said that morning, and that had been the longest sentence she'd heard from him all day. By evening, when the sky bruised purple and the first chill touched the air, they came upon a cabin half buried in pine shadow. Smoke drifted from its chimney, the scent of wood and stew curling through the trees. Talon reined in, his jaw tight. "Mountain man," he said. "He trades for furs. Won't trouble you." But as they dismounted, the cabin door creaked open, and a figure stepped out. A broad-shouldered man with a beard the color of old rust and eyes like the kind that measured women before speaking to them. "You've got a woman with you," he said, voice low but sharp. "Didn't think your kind trafficked with theirs." Talon ignored the insult. "She's not for trade," he said. "Just needs food and rest." The man spat in the dirt. "Ain't what it looks like? Woman dressed like that don't come honest." Clara stiffened, shame and anger twisting inside her. "I was sold," she said, voice trembling. "And bought," the man replied coldly. "Makes no difference to me." Talon stepped closer. "She's under my word." The man's lip curled. "Then your word means less than it should." Before Clara could move, the man's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Men like you think you can play savior, but a woman that's been sold don't forget her price." She pulled back, but he was strong, his grip bruising. Talon's voice cut through the moment, calm but sharp as flint. "Let her go." "Or what?" the man sneered. "You'll—" He didn't finish. Talon's hand moved, fast and deliberate, knocking the man's arm aside. The mountain man stumbled, surprised, then straightened, rage flashing across his face. "You think I won't teach her what obedience means?" he growled, reaching for the whip coiled by the door. Clara froze as he cracked it once, the sound tearing the air like thunder. "You hit her," Talon said quietly, "and you'll answer to me." The man laughed. "She's not yours." "No," Talon said, "but I'm not yours either." The whip snapped again, but before it landed, Talon stepped forward and took it himself, the leather curling across his shoulder with a sound that made Clara flinch. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood between her and the man, his eyes steady, his body refusing to yield. "Now you're done," he said softly. The man hesitated, uncertain whether to strike again. But something in Talon's calm broke him. He dropped the whip, spat, and muttered, "A fool's martyr," before retreating into his cabin. Talon turned, his chest rising slow, blood already darkening the edge of his shirt. Clara reached out, tears burning behind her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why take what was meant for me?" "Because men like him count on silence," he said. "You're done being quiet." He walked to the fire pit outside, poured water over the wound, and said no more. That night, as he slept by the dying coals, Clara sat awake beside him, the whip coiled in her lap. The sound of it haunted her, but the sight of his stillness, the way he'd stood without fear, stayed louder. And though she didn't touch him, she whispered into the dark, "You didn't buy me. You freed me." The words vanished into the wind, but somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, she thought she heard him breathe back. "Then keep it that way." The next day broke gray and hollow, the kind of dawn that carried more silence than light. The air smelled of wet pine and iron from the blood Talon had washed off his shoulder. They rode without speaking, the mountains rising higher with every mile until the land itself seemed to close around them. Clara felt the ache of guilt twisting inside her. The whip mark that wasn't hers burned hotter in her thoughts than the sun ever could. When Talon stopped by a stream to water the horse, she knelt beside him and reached for the cloth tied around his arm. "Let me clean it," she said. "You'll make it worse." "Then I'll make it worse with care," she replied, her voice steady. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. She dipped the cloth in the stream, wrung it out, and pressed it to his shoulder. He flinched but didn't pull away. For the first time, she saw the strength that came not from size or anger, but from restraint. "You shouldn't have stepped in," she whispered. "He would have stopped." "No," he said softly. "Men like that don't stop till someone makes them." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're bleeding because of me." "Then make it mean something," he said simply. When they reached the plateau by noon, the wind shifted, carrying the distant rhythm of drums. Talon reined in, listening. "Lakota," he murmured. "They travel near this ridge." "Friends of yours?" she asked. "Brothers once," he said, "before they called me too quiet for war." They dismounted near the crest where a small group of riders appeared against the horizon. 5 men, proud and still, their hair braided with red cloth. One rode forward, his presence commanding even from a distance. "Talon," he called, voice deep and measured. "You ride with the white woman now?" Talon inclined his head. "She rides under my word." The man's gaze shifted to Clara, sharp but not cruel. "Then she rides under mine as well, if your word still holds meaning." He dismounted, approached her slowly, and spoke again, his tone softer. "You look afraid." "I've been sold," she said, "and whipped for being seen." His expression hardened. "Then you have known our women's fate, too." He turned to Talon. "Bring her to the fire tonight. We will share food and forget the world outside these hills." When night came, they sat among the Lakota around a low flame, the air filled with the scent of smoked meat and pine. The chief, whose name was Matto, spoke of roads and rivers, of how the world had grown smaller, but hearts had not. "They call us enemies," he said, staring into the fire, "but the land never chose sides." Clara listened, her chest heavy with a strange comfort she hadn't felt since childhood. After they ate, Matto's wife, a tall woman with silver beads in her hair, brought her a small comb carved from bone. "For you," she said, "a woman who walks new must leave the old dust behind." She sat behind Clara and began to braid her hair, slow and reverent, weaving silence into each strand. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. "Peace," Clara whispered. "Home," the woman corrected. "Peace comes later." When it was done, Matto looked at her and said, "You are not the woman who was sold. You are the woman who lived." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks before she could stop them. Talon stood apart from the circle, watching. His eyes softer than she'd ever seen. When she caught his gaze, she saw no ownership, no debt, only a quiet understanding that mercy wasn't a gift to be repaid. It was a language only the brave learned to speak. That night, under the vast sky alive with stars, Clara lay awake listening to the rhythm of the drums fading into the wind and realized she had finally heard something louder than her shame. A heartbeat that wasn't hers alone. When morning came, the Lakota camp shimmered with dew and quiet laughter, the sound of children running between the tents, their bare feet drumming softly against the damp grass. Smoke rose from the fires in thin gray ribbons that smelled of cedar and sweet sage, curling into the clean air like prayers that had learned patience. Clara woke to the feeling of warmth against her cheek. The sun, gentle now, not cruel, and for a moment she forgot the weight of everything that had come before. Talon was already awake, speaking with Matto near the horses. Their voices carried softly through the air, measured and calm. When she approached, they stopped, both turning toward her. "You slept," Talon said, almost like a question. "For the first time, yes," she replied. Matto nodded, his expression unreadable but kind. "We will ride with you to the crossing," he said. "The road beyond belongs to no one. That makes it safest." Clara thanked him, though words felt small against the weight of his generosity. Before they left, Matto's wife pressed something into her palm, a small braid of horsehair tied with red thread. "Keep it," she said, "so you remember whose fire warmed you." They rode eastward through the morning, the prairie wide and golden around them, the horizon stretching so far it made the heart ache. The children from the camp waved until they disappeared from sight, their laughter echoing faintly through the wind. For miles, no one spoke. Then Clara asked, "Talon, do you belong to them or to no one?" He considered before answering. "Both," he said. "The Lakota taught me the strength of silence. The white man taught me what words can break. Between them, I found the road." "And me?" she asked quietly. "Where do I belong?" He looked at her, and for a long time, the question hung unanswered. Then he said, "You belong where you stop running." His words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. The trail wound between cliffs where the air grew cooler, and the wind carried the distant cry of eagles. By midday, they reached a narrow pass where the road forked, one path leading north toward the mountains, the other east into the lowlands. "This is where we part," Talon said. "My road goes north." "And mine?" she asked. "Yours goes where the world stops taking from you," he said. She wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't know how to walk roads without him, but the look in his eyes silenced her. "I can't go back," she whispered. "No one goes back," he said. "You just walk forward with less fear." He dismounted, reaching into his saddlebag, and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Food," he said, handing it to her. "For the road." When she took it, her fingers brushed his, and the touch felt heavier than any farewell. "Why do you help me?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment, then said, "Because someone once helped me when I didn't ask. I've been trying to balance that ever since." She wanted to speak, but words felt too fragile, so she only nodded. He mounted again, turning his horse towards the north trail. "Clara," he said, voice low. "Your name, it means light. Don't forget that." She smiled faintly. "And yours?" "It means claw," he said. "We both survive by holding on." Then he rode away, his silhouette growing smaller against the rising sun until he was nothing but a dark line between earth and sky. She stood there for a long while, the wind catching her hair, and the braid still tied with red thread brushing her wrist. When she finally turned east, the road felt unfamiliar, but so did her fear. The land stretched wide and open, and though she walked alone, she didn't feel forsaken. Somewhere behind her, a people called her sister, and somewhere ahead, the world waited to learn her name again. By dusk, the road had thinned into dust and stone, winding through a hollow valley where the air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky stayed dry. Clara walked until her legs trembled, her thoughts a tangle of gratitude and emptiness. Each step carried her farther from what she'd been, and closer to something she didn't yet understand. The bundle Talon had given her was lighter now. One strip of jerky, a crust of bread, and the red-threaded braid that seemed to hum with every heartbeat. When she reached a crossing where two wagon trails met, she found the faint smoke of a campfire and the silhouette of a man crouched beside it. He was tall, but slouched from years of labor, his coat worn to the color of clay, a wide hat shadowing his face. He looked up as she approached, his eyes glinting with the calm suspicion of someone used to being alone. "Trail's empty this time of year," he said. "What's a woman doing on it?" "Walking until she finds where she belongs," she said. "Then you'll walk a long while." He motioned toward the fire. "Sit if you're tired. Won't ask more than that." She hesitated, then sat, her body grateful for the warmth. The man stirred the coals with a stick, the orange glow reflecting off the scar on his cheek. "Name's Caleb," he said. "Ranch hand up north once. Now I just follow fences that need mending." "Clara," she said quietly. "You came from Apache land?" he asked. "Looks on you like red clay." "I came from where I was sold," she said. "Then I was freed." He studied her face, not in judgment, but with the slow understanding of someone who'd lived too close to pain. "You walked the kind of road that leaves no tracks," he said. "Ain't many come through it alive." They shared the food she carried, and though it wasn't much, it felt sacred somehow. Two strangers feeding each other's hunger without asking what kind it was. After a while, Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden cross, carving half-finished. "You believe?" he asked. "In God?" "In anything," he said. She looked at the fire, the sparks lifting into the dark. "I used to believe in being chosen," she said. "Then I learned that mercy chooses whoever's still standing." He nodded slowly. "That's faith enough." The night deepened, and the world beyond the fire grew quiet, except for the steady rhythm of wind through grass. "I've got a wagon not far from here," he said. "You can rest till morning." She shook her head. "I can't stay. I've already been kept by too many." He smiled faintly. "Then stay because you choose it." The offer lingered, gentle and without weight. She looked at him and saw not the danger she'd been taught to fear in men, but the exhaustion of someone trying to keep the world stitched together with whatever kindness he could find. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. "Maybe that's why the fire didn't die before you came," he said. When she finally lay down near the embers, the stars spread wide above her like a roof built from all the miles she'd survived. In her dreams, she saw Talon's calm eyes and the Lakota woman's braid, and the mountain man's whip falling harmlessly into dust. She woke before dawn to find Caleb already gone, his tools packed, a single note scratched into the dirt beside the fire. "Keep walking east. You're almost home." She smiled, though tears blurred her sight. The world was still cold, still vast, but it no longer felt empty. Somewhere ahead, home waited, not a house or a husband, but a place where her name meant more than what men had done to her. She wrapped the red braid around her wrist, shouldered her small bundle, and stepped into the new morning light. The day broke slow and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain but offered none. Clara followed the wagon ruts eastward until the trail dissolved into open plain, the grass bending under a restless wind. Hunger had returned, not the kind that gnaws at the body, but the quiet ache that reminds you no one's called your name in days. She walked until her feet blistered. Then she saw it. A narrow river cutting through the land like a silver thread, its banks littered with driftwood and reeds. Kneeling, she cupped the water in her hands, drinking until her throat no longer burned. When she lifted her head, she noticed movement upriver. A small figure standing near the bend, barefoot, holding a stick like a sword. It was a child, no older than 8, his clothes torn but his stance proud. "You lost?" she called softly. The boy turned. Eyes wide but curious. "You're not from here," he said. "No one walks this road alone unless they're running." "Maybe I am," she answered. "From what?" "From everything." The boy tilted his head. "Then you'll need a map." He motioned for her to follow, leading her to a small wagon hidden beneath a willow. Inside sat a woman, pale and weak, her breathing shallow. "My ma's sick," the boy said quietly. "We've been here 3 days. I tried to find help, but the town's far. Clara knelt beside the woman, pressing her fingers to her wrist. The pulse was faint but steady. She needs water and food, Clara said. You've done well keeping her alive. The boy frowned. You talk like someone who's used to hurt. Maybe I am, she said, but I'm learning not to stay there. She took out the last of her bread and split it, handing half to him. Eat slow, she said. Your ma needs you strong. The boy hesitated. What about you? I've eaten enough mercy to last, she replied. The rain finally came, a slow, steady drizzle that smelled of dust turning to life. Clara built a small fire beneath the wagon's shelter, feeding it with dry twigs. She boiled water in a dented tin and held it to the woman's lips, whispering, You'll see the sun again. The woman stirred, her voice a ghost. Who are you? Someone who was found, Clara said. Now I'm finding others. The woman smiled faintly before sleep took her again. When night came, Clara sat beside the boy, watching the river shimmer under the dim moonlight. Your father? She asked gently. Gone, he said. He worked for the railroad. Didn't come back after winter. She nodded, staring into the water. Mine left before I learned what leaving meant. The boy looked up. You talk like a preacher. No, she said, just someone who's seen both sides of silence. He yawned, resting his head against her arm, the trust of it making her chest tighten. When morning came, the woman's breathing steadied, her color returning slightly. Clara smiled and whispered a prayer she didn't remember learning. Before she left, she cut a small piece from the red braid around her wrist and tied it to the boy's stick. This means home, she said, so you remember the day someone stayed. You're leaving? He asked, half asleep. The road's still calling, she said softly, but I'll carry this river with me. She walked east again, the dawn spilling gold across the wet earth, the wind brushing her face like a benediction. The sound of the boy's voice followed her faintly. Thank you, ma'am. She smiled without turning back. For the first time, the word didn't sting. It felt like a name she could grow into, one given not by ownership, but by grace. By the third day of walking, Clara reached a ridge where the land flattened into open prairie, the kind that stretched until sky and soil blurred together. Her dress had torn along the hem, her boots split at the sides, and her hair hung loose from the braid the Lakota woman had woven. Yet she felt lighter than she had in years. Hunger came and went, but peace, quiet, humble peace, lingered like a steady companion. The sun dipped low when she saw it. A half-built chapel on the horizon, its wooden frame bare against the evening light. Smoke rose from a camp nearby, and beside the smoldering fire knelt a man in a black coat, his hands clasped, his hat on the ground beside him. He looked up as she approached, his face lined but gentle. "Evening, traveler," he said. "You look like someone the wind hasn't finished shaping." "Then I hope it's kind wind," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Kindness is a slow storm." His name was Reverend Ellis, a preacher sent to build a church for a town that hadn't yet arrived. Around them stood piles of timber, tools, and a half-completed roof. "You building this alone?" she asked. "God and I take turns holding the nails," he said, "though he's better at it." She laughed for the first time in days, the sound strange but real. He studied her quietly. "You've seen sorrow." "And survived it," she said. "Then you know what faith costs." She looked at the empty walls, the unfinished beams stretching toward the sky. "Is this your faith?" "This?" he said, gesturing to the wood. "This is practice. Faith's in the waiting." He motioned for her to sit, and she did. her body grateful for the rest. He handed her a cup of water, cool from the well, and they drank in silence. After a while, he said, "You came from Apache land?" "From being sold," she said, "then freed by mercy I didn't earn." His eyes softened. That's the only kind worth keeping. As the fire crackled, she told him her story. Not every detail, but enough for him to understand the miles written behind her eyes. When she finished, he said nothing, just placed a hand over the cup between them. "You know," he murmured, "this church won't have walls for a while yet. But maybe that's how it should be. Some souls need the sky to pray under." She stared at the frame above them, the stars beginning to glimmer through its gaps. "I thought I'd lost my faith," she said, "but maybe it was just walking ahead of me." He nodded. "Faith doesn't always wait in the pews. Sometimes it stands on the road and waves you home." They worked together through the next day, hauling wood, driving nails, her laughter joining the steady rhythm of his hammer. By evening, the roof frame was up, and a single bell hung from the highest beam. "Doesn't ring yet," he said, smiling. "It will," she answered. Before leaving, she pressed the last of her bread into his hand. "For the next traveler," she said, "so they don't arrive hungry." He looked at her with quiet gratitude. "And you? What will you take with you?" She glanced toward the horizon. "A road that hasn't run out of mercy yet." As she walked away, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of the new bell swaying gently against the beam. It didn't ring, not yet, but she heard its promise anyway, soft as forgiveness. Steady as breath, by the time Clara reached the low valley beyond the ridge, smoke rose not from campfires, but from ruin. The air stung with the smell of burnt hay and iron, and the horizon pulsed orange with the glow of a barn still smoldering. She quickened her pace, her boots sinking into ash-softened soil until she reached the wreckage of what had once been a small homestead. 2 wagons overturned, a fence half collapsed, a child's toy lying blackened beside the well. The silence that followed fire was always the loudest thing she'd ever known. Then she heard it, a groan from behind the corral. Clara ran, lifting a broken beam with trembling arms until she uncovered a man pinned beneath it. He was young, barely 30, his shirt scorched, his breath ragged. "Help me," he gasped. She braced herself and pushed until the wood rolled aside. His face twisted in pain, but he managed to sit up. "They took her," he said. "My wife, riders from the mining camp, said they'd come for what was owed." "How many?" Clara asked. 4, maybe 5. She looked at the trail leading into the ravine. Fresh hoof prints, reckless, cruel. "You can't go after them," he rasped. "You'll be killed. So will she if I don't." She helped him to the shade, gave him water, and started walking. The path wound down through scorched brush into a hollow where the fire's glow still lingered. Her heart pounded, but her steps stayed even. At the bend, she saw them, 5 men by the river, their horses drinking, their laughter echoing through the canyon. One of them dragged a woman toward the rocks, her dress torn, her wrists bound. The world blurred, and Clara's body moved before thought could catch up. She snatched a fallen branch, still smoldering at the tip, and shouted, "Let her go!" The men turned, startled, then laughed. "Another stray?" one sneered. "We'll take turns." But before they moved, another sound cut through the canyon, a sharp whistle, low and commanding. From the shadows above, a rider appeared, his horse sliding down the slope in a spray of dirt. The figure dismounted in a single motion, broad and familiar, the outline of a man she'd seen only in memory. "Talon," she whispered. He stood between her and the riders, his rifle leveled, his voice calm. "You can leave her," he said, "or you can die here." The leader spat. "You think one man can—" The crack of a warning shot silenced him. Talon didn't flinch. "That was for your horse. The next is for you." The men hesitated, anger fading into calculation, then into fear. One by one they backed away, mounted, and rode off, leaving the woman trembling by the water. Clara ran to her, untying her wrists. "You're safe," she whispered, though her hands shook. When she looked up, Talon was already lowering his rifle, his chest rising slow and steady. "You said you were heading north," she said breathlessly. "I was," he replied. "Then I saw smoke." The rescued woman sobbed, clutching Clara's arm. "My husband, he's alive?" "Waiting," Clara said. Talon lifted the woman gently onto his horse. "He will be when she's home." They walked beside the horse all the way back to the burned homestead. The husband's cry when he saw his wife broke something open in Clara that no fire ever could. She turned away, tears streaking the ash from her face. Talon stood beside her, his eyes on the mountains. "You still walk roads that don't belong to you," he said softly. "Maybe they do now," she answered. "Mercy keeps finding me on them." He gave a small, rare smile. "Then maybe you've stopped running." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain through the smoke. The fire behind them hissed, dying at last. She watched the couple embrace, and for a moment the world felt right again. "You came back," she said. "No," Talon replied. "You never left where I was." Then he mounted his horse and looked down at her. "There's a place east of here, a town building something new. Maybe start there." She nodded. "Will I see you again?" "If the road's kind," he said. Then he rode off into the smoke, leaving only hoofprints and silence, and a woman who finally understood that home wasn't a place waiting ahead, but the trail Mercy left behind. The town Talon had spoken of lay a day's walk east, resting in a shallow basin where the river bent around fields not yet green. Clara reached it near sunset, her body aching, her heart uncertain. A new wooden sign hung at the gate. Red Hollow, population still too small to fill a church. Children chased a stray chicken near the well, and a blacksmith's hammer clanged in rhythm with a hymn someone sang behind shuttered windows. She paused, realizing how strange it felt to stand somewhere that wasn't broken. The people here were wary, but kind. A woman with a basket of corn offered her a smile. "You from the Firelands?" she asked. Clara nodded. "Then you've walked through worse than hunger," the woman said, and handed her a roll of bread still warm. Clara thanked her, tears stinging without permission. She found work that night helping at the small boarding house, sweeping floors, mending sheets, doing the kind of labor that used to feel like servitude, but now felt like belonging. The next morning brought thunder without rain. As the sky darkened, she stepped outside, drawn by shouts from the far edge of town. A wagon had arrived, carrying men she recognized, the same ones from the canyon, bruised but not broken, their faces marked with resentment. They dismounted and marched toward the sheriff's office, muttering that they'd been ambushed by an Apache and his woman. The sheriff, a tired man with kind eyes, stepped onto the porch. "Ain't no law against being saved," he said, but the men were already stirring the crowd, their voices slick with venom. "You hide her here," one shouted. "The one who helped him." Clara felt the air tighten. She turned to leave, but then the first stone struck the ground near her boot. "There she is!" someone yelled. The street fell silent. The men closed in, spitting words she'd heard too many times: whore, heathen's wife, cursed woman. The sheriff moved to stand in front of her, hand on his holster, but before he could speak, Another voice rose from the edge of the crowd. Enough. The sound cut clean through the noise, low, familiar, steady. Talon stepped forward from the shadows, dust on his coat, eyes like weathered steel. He walked slowly until he stood beside her, his presence pulling the whole street still. "She's under no one's name but her own," he said. "But she's earned mine if it keeps your hand still." The men hesitated. "We don't take orders from your kind." Talon didn't flinch. "Then take mercy from mine." He lifted his gaze toward the townsfolk gathered near the well. "You build this place from nothing. You say it's new land, but a land's only new if it learns new ways to be human." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. One by one, the men backed away, their anger shrinking beneath his calm. The sheriff finally exhaled and said, "I think that's settled." Talon turned to Clara. "You said once you were running from everything," he murmured. "You've stopped." The crowd began to disperse, leaving only the quiet murmur of relief. Clara looked up at him, the man who had been her rescuer, her witness, her teacher in silence. "And you?" she asked. "Still walking," he said. "But now, maybe not alone." The clouds broke then, sunlight spilling through like mercy remembered. He reached out his hand, not to claim her, but to steady her. For the first time since the day she'd been sold, she took a man's hand without fear. Around them, Red Hollow exhaled, its first test of decency passed. And when the wind moved through the new church frame on the hill, it made the unfinished bell hum softly, as if heaven itself had leaned close to listen. Morning came gentle, the kind of light that didn't burn but healed. The town of Red Hollow stirred awake slowly, smoke rising from chimneys, roosters calling across the fields. Clara stood by the open window of the boarding house, the smell of bread and rain filling the room. Outside, Talon watered the horse at the trough, his movements quiet, unhurried, as though time had finally loosened its grip on him. She watched him for a while, the curve of his shoulders, the way he always looked toward the horizon before the day began, as if he still expected the past to come riding out of it. When he saw her at the window, he tipped his hat and smiled, small and almost shy. It wasn't the smile of a man rescuing anyone. It was the smile of someone who'd finally found a reason to stay still. Downstairs, the boarding house keeper, Mrs. Greeley, handed Clara a folded apron. "Breakfast crowd's light today," she said kindly, "and the sheriff said the riders left before dawn. Guess they decided peace was cheaper than pride?" Clara nodded. "That's how most wars end." She stepped outside, the porch boards warm beneath her bare feet. "Heading out again?" she asked as Talon cinched the saddle straps. "No," he said. "Not yet. Roads can wait their turn." "And if they call louder?" "Then I'll tell them I've got something worth hearing first." She smiled at that, though a shadow of doubt flickered through her eyes. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she admitted. "You've been doing it since the fire," he said. "You walk, you help, you build. That's home." She looked toward the half-built church on the hill, its new bell gleaming in the morning sun. "He finished the roof," she said softly. "Reverend Ellis." "Maybe Faith likes company," Talon replied. "Maybe it was waiting for you." A child's laughter drifted from the street. Two of the town's orphans chasing each other around a wagon, their joy bright as the day itself. Clara watched them and felt something inside her unclench. She knelt, called them over, and offered the last of her bread. "Eat," she said, smiling. "The road's longer when you're hungry." They thanked her and ran off again, crumbs trailing like blessings. Talon watched quietly. "You still give away what little you have," he said. "It's how I remember who I am," she answered. The church bell rang then, not loud, but clear, the first true sound it had made since being hung. People paused in the streets, listening. Some smiled, some bowed their heads. Talon looked toward the sound. "It rings for everyone," he said, "even those who think they don't deserve it." Clara turned to him, her eyes bright in the sunlight. "You'll stay?" she asked. "For a while," he said, "long enough to see the crops take root, long enough to forget how it felt to ride alone." She stepped closer, the dust swirling softly around their boots. "You named me home once," she whispered. "Maybe that's what you were looking for too." He didn't answer, but his hand brushed hers. Brief, steady, enough. The moment felt like a prayer that didn't need words. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in gold, Clara stood at the edge of town and looked west, the road stretching back through every place she'd been broken and rebuilt. Somewhere out there, fires had burned, chains had snapped, and a stranger's mercy had turned survival into life. Now, in this small town with its half-finished church and a bell that finally rang, she understood what the Lakota woman had meant. Peace comes later, but home comes quietly first. The breeze shifted, carrying the sound of the bell one last time, soft as a promise. Clara smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I'm not running anymore." Sometimes the road doesn't end where you expect. It ends where you stop being afraid of who you've become. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to keep these journeys of mercy and redemption alive. Would you still walk the road if you knew it would lead you home?